In 1500, the Acts of Unity were passed, which reformed missionary schools and gave them wider scale to convert those who were not Albigensians. This was largely pursued in order to recover some of the stability that was lost during the Mundskrise. Eva II would truly spend the rest of her life attempting to repair the damage done to her reign. In 1501, certain political machinations within Africa took place that changed the nature of the empire to a certain degree. The Marrone family, of Sicilian descent, had at a certain point accepted a large deal of Greek refugees from the Peloponnese region when the Muslim Lakandu conquered it. These families did well in Africa, and one even became a noble house. Now, decades later, this noble house stood poised to topple a family which once gave them aid. The old, childless Emperor Louis Marrone died when, with the support of her clique of nobles, Imperatora Theodisa Musuros of Africa ascended to the throne instead of Louis's 20-year-old nephew, Vagra Marrone. Her first decree was to leave an open invitation to Greeks the world over to come and see Africa as their new home, hoping to utilize them as a base of support. Imperatora Theodisa was excommunicated by Pope Agatho II for her destabilizing of a respected Catholic realm and a usurping of a respected Catholic noble house. By 1502, the Renaissance is considered to have reached the Volksreich. The Volkish Renaissance was characterized by shocking religious art, depicting the surreal scenes of the Gnostic religion. Surreal depictions of the monad, chilling compositions of the demiurge, glorious statues of Christ, and insane plays about the unknowable nature of the divine source called the pleroma, meaning fullness. The Renaissance revived the essential Gnostic underpinnings of Albigensianism in the eyes of the subjects, sparking a deeper appreciation for just how different the Volksreich was from the rest of the world. Meanwhile, while the Volksreich was turning inward, the rest of the world was turning outward. A penniless former noble was wandering about Europe around this time, and found refuge from certain assailants in his work upon ships. He worked largely in Aquitania, eventually proving his worth as a minor ship captain by fighting off an African pirate vessel, which had since the ascension of Theodisia occasionally attacked European ships as well. He was injured in this fight and was sent to rest in a nearby church. As he knew how to read, he pondered the nature of the world by reading many books on the subject. Eventually, once he was out, he was honored by the Emperor of Aquitania, Emperor Phillipe. However, what was supposed to be a quick show of thanks fast became a pleading for 2 ships and license to act on behalf of Aquitania to sail the Atlantic Ocean. 2 days passed, trying to decide whether to have him executed for his presumptions or to spare him for his service given to the realm. Emperor Phillipe decided that sending him off was as good as death, and so let him go. He was given 2 ships, full of the worst wretches that could be found, and they set off on the 1st of March 1506. It took them over 3 months to cross the Atlantic, getting blown off course halfway through. One of the ships, the Gloire, sank in a storm. Eventually, however, the Dame Bleue sighted land. They landed and planted the line flag of Aquitania on an island in the Caribbean, the string of which, issuing from the coast, he named the Antilles. As such, the New World was discovered on the 29th of May 1506 by Vagra Marrone, the ousted Prince of Africa. In his terrible hardships, he was made into a legend. Of the 100 men sent with him, 30 returned, but regardless, Emperor Phillipe was dumbfounded. His next expedition was fully funded by the Imperial Crown of Aquitania, and so Vagra Marrone would spend the rest of his days as a great explorer. Back on the continent in 1508, in response to the expulsion of a Volkish diplomat, the Volksreich placed an embargo upon the Magyarország. Tensions increased, but war did not come. In 1511, the works of famous Volkish artist Erika Norbert toured the nation. Among these works were the paintings Study on the Pleroma and Passion of the Monad's Blessing. After over a decade of eventless peace and development in Europe, the musket was invented in 1525. On the 2nd of January, 1526, Kaiser Karl II von Bauer ascended to the throne. He was of a similar temperament to his predecessor, though he was not quite so bold as to enforce his reforms, even through writing. Karl II was, however, a lover of the arts, and commissioned a great many of them, which were to be enjoyed at the many polite parties he would throw. In 1528, Russia lost a minor border war to the Magyarország, and so the Volksreich sent aid. This loss acted as a most ominous warning to the Volksreich and its allies that the Magyarország was no longer distracted by such arresting internal turmoil. In 1536, after decades upon decades of refusal and negotiation, the Volksreich finally began exploration of the New World. They sent Captain Hans Weiss out into the frigid north to find land the Mediterranean powers would be dreadfully unwilling to discover. In this way, the Volksreich discovered Newfoundland. In 1538, a separate group of Volkish explorers headed south under the command of Jonas Arling, colonizing the Azores as a jumping-off point for further colonization. On the 1st of January 1540, Kaiser Ivo von Bauer ascended to the throne at the age of 9, advised by the regent and council. Later that year, a series of minor peasant revolts were put down, restless at the amount of money being drawn away from them and towards the colonization effort. It was decided after several expeditions that the Volksreich would pursue a policy of coexistence with the natives, trading with them and living in separate settlements. Also, while many of the colonizing powers would focus on the mainland in order to accrue gold and other wealth, the crown directed that Volkish explorers focus on the oft-neglected islands of the New World. This would lead to the first true Volkish colony in the New World, that of Cuba. Cuba was eagerly settled, seen as a chance for a new beginning by many Volkish poor. In 1550, the printing press revolutionized the world, allowing for an explosion of educated people across Europe, and a flaring of terrible unrest in the meantime. In 1554, the Andalusians converted to Catholicism in a bid to save themselves from the Reconquête, leaving the Yusufids as the last Muslims in Spain. On the 6th of May, 1571, a monk in Romsdal in the Kingdom of Iceland named Gunnar Arnasson began to publicly criticize the Catholic Church and gained a rather sizable following, paving the way for a reformation of the faith. Namely, he took issue with the Catholic practice of indulgences, salvation by works instead of faith, prayer to saints, and the Marian precepts, such as her perpetual virginity and being caught up bodily into heaven. These new ideas were wildly popular and found their way to the New World on boats to Alnasson, Colombia, Alnason's major South American colony. By 1574, King Sverre Almr of Iceland began to crack down on these Protestants, as they were so called, and this resulted in a revolt for religious freedom. In 1577, the colonial nation of Cuba was formed, the first beneath the Volkish crown, and one to challenge the Antilles under Aquitania in the Caribbean. By 1579, the religious and civil unrest in Iceland escalated into full-blown civil war. King Sverre Almr had the full support of the Catholic Church, which he used to purchase a great deal of bloodthirsty mercenaries. Gunnar, also known as Arnasson the monk, had the people of Iceland with him, and they fought tooth and nail to wrest victory from this fight. Meanwhile, back south, with La Reconquête almost complete, the Yusufids fled Spain entirely to attempt greener pastures in La Plata, as far away from Aquitania as they could manage to be. By 1596, the seat of the papacy was passed around and competed for among the Catholic countries of Europe, as though it were a prize to be won. The seat would change every time a pope died, and this only made the Catholic Church seem ever more shallow. Of course, this was a necessary sacrifice, as Rome itself was much too unsafe, and if the Pope were to return, the papal state would be invaded immediately, or at least, this was how several popes felt, with Africia, a fresh excommunicate, right there on their doorstep. The Pope's fears were well placed, though not for the reason he so thought. Magyar Rome suddenly erupted into revolt, their counter-conversion efforts of the past decades total and unmitigated failures. After 2 weeks of the Albigensian rebels holding Rome, Kaiser Ivo declared war upon the Magyarország to help the rebels and reintegrate Rome into his empire. Due to the Magyars being distracted with another war, it was over by the time they could send anyone to Rome. The rebels flung the gates open, and the Magyars had no choice but to stem the tide of Volkish men by relinquishing the city that the Pope didn't even occupy, and so this was how Rome came back into the hands of the Albigensians yet again. Meanwhile, the conflict that was distracting the Magyars was a short but fierce and bloody war, sparked by an African pirate vessel boarding a Magyar treasure ship, which led to the conquest of Bari from Africa, followed by a return of stolen treasures and a hasty peace treaty. Imperatore Alexios Musuros walked back his mother's decision to open up European vessels to their piracy, and redoubled his efforts on collecting slaves and tribute from Africa and the Middle East.